Hi, thanks everybody for coming out today. As Mike said, my name's Scott Allen Cambo, and today I'm going to be presenting some of the work I did at FX Pal during my internship there last summer. Here we considered the critical role that work breaks play for the common knowledge workers, such as ourselves. And in this, we designed an application called BreakSense, which tries to augment our normal work break, promote mobility, so we can come back from that work break feeling refreshed, relaxed, and ready to work. But before I talk about that technology, I want to talk a little bit about the typical American workday. So it's now Wednesday of the conference. We've had a lot of sitting and sedentary time. And this is not too abnormal from the average American worker who spends about 9 hours working and another hour getting to and from work. So if you're working in an office, that's a lot of time spent sitting down. Now, the World Health Organization thought about this in 2010, and they thought, well, you know, mobility and walking and these kinds of physical activities shouldn't just kind of wait for before and after work. They should actually be a part of that work process. And to do that, we need to allow people to have flexibility in the timing and duration of their work breaks. And that's when we started thinking about BreakSense. So BreakSense is an application, like I said, that augments that work break and promotes mobility through kind of a fun activity when it sees that you've walked away from your workstation. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about. We have a set of design principles that we derived that we feel are appropriate for work break applications in that work context. The design and implementation of BreakSense, which we feel fulfills these design principles. And a short pilot study of BreakSense where we really tried to understand that timing aspect through a couple different interactions. So getting into design principles. We have quite a few that we talk about in the paper. In the interest of time, I'm going to emphasize a few of these. So first, thinking about work interruptions. What we kind of know about work interruptions is that it's very hard to determine the appropriate time to interrupt someone's work so that they can still feel productive afterward. And there's a high cost to getting that wrong. So what we tried to focus on in this is detecting when somebody's already left their workstation and is kind of self-interrupted their work. Let's see here. So we also wanted to think about some of the social aspects of the workplace. The primary purpose of the workplace is to work. So when we design technologies for the work breaks, design technologies for the workplace, we need to think of things that need to be minimally disruptive. So no audible sounds or activities that could be potentially distracting to your coworkers. In addition to that, in a paper prototype of our system, we saw that users were unwilling to go to areas like near their boss's office, and they were really afraid of being perceived as not working during that time or being disruptive to their coworkers. So this was something we really had to think about in the design of this, and a lot of this tries to be a bit seamless and discrete. So when break activities are too short, though, they tend to leave us not feeling quite as refreshed and relaxed. We don't really get that cognitive detachment from our work task that allows us that. And when they're too long, it's really hard to feel ready to work when we come back. That transition back to the work task becomes a little bit more difficult. And both these things are really necessary to feel productive when we get back. And I'm gonna talk about this a bit more when I talk about the pilot of the study. So how did we implement this? How did we fulfill these design principles? We used the Android platform and the Microsoft Band 2 Smartwatch. The Smartwatch really helped us get at activity recognition and physiological measures like heart rate and steps. And that allowed us to give the user kind of feedback for small interactions and show them that these small interactions are actually contributing to better health outcomes. In terms of detecting when someone walked away from their workstation, we used a system of what are called Ibeacons. So these are just Bluetooth transmitters that send out just a unique identifying signal. That strength of that signal is kind of used to determine how far away you are from the certain beacons. And the user kind of sets up a home beacon that they use. When the user, this orange line or circle here kind of represents a threshold where the user has decided that if I'm outside this threshold, you can consider that me being away from my desk. So the user might get up to go get coffee, walk outside that threshold, and they'd see a notification that looks like this, alerting them of an opportunity for kind of a fun activity that they could do on their break. Now, at this point, we could get this wrong, right? Someone could be going to a meeting. They could be just trying to use the bathroom real quick and get right back to their work. And we wanted to be respectful of this. So a lot of these notifications, or all these notifications, you can accept them. You can dismiss them by pressing the ignore button or swiping it away, or you could just completely ignore it. You don't have to attend to it at all, and it'll just go away on its own. So at this point, the user might start, I should back up a little. If the user accepts that break opportunity, they'll see a map that looks like this and a star in the area where we would like them to go to, is kind of add a few extra steps to their work break. As I walk closer and that Bluetooth signal becomes apparent to the smartphone, we indicate that to the user by enlarging the star that is shown on the map. Now, in terms of managing those social boundaries in the workplace, we added two features to the phone for that. One of them is to ask for a new star, so sort of saying like, I'd really rather not go to that section of the workplace, but give me a new one, I'll try that. Or just to kind of assert, I'm basically there, kind of an I am there button. Now, this can enable cheating, but this is not so much of a social application at this point, so you'd really just be cheating yourself. At this point, you can start walking up to that star. When you get there, the phone vibrates, drawing your attention back to the phone. And when you tap the application, you'll see a screen that looks like this, asking you to kind of embody that interaction and drag the star into the box. And when you do, the box closes and we reward you with a fun fact about cats. The one here says cat bites are more likely to become infected than dog bites. So if you have a cat that bites, that's not as much of a fun fact. So at this point, you've collected the star and we assign a new star. Now, you can go ahead and attend to that new star, or you can go about your regular work break. Either way, this is meant to feel very natural, and it doesn't require much interaction in order to make that decision at that point. When you get back, we take those physiological measurements, along with the duration of the break and the time you took it, and we display that back to the user in a summary view like this, so they can see that even though this was just a little bit of added interaction, added walking, it's actually adding more steps to your day. It's getting you up and walking a little bit. So we had a couple of research questions about this. The first is, would people engage with this in the workplace? The second has to do with timing. So is it better to have a bounded or unbounded system recommended break activity in the workplace? And so some of this might start to look familiar, and we noticed that last summer when this game came out. So we were designing this interaction, and Pokemon Go came out, and we really started to think about the design of that. Like the actual catchphrase of Pokemon Go is catch them all, right? But in the workplace, we had to think about if that was really the appropriate interaction in this sense. And we thought about that through two different interactions. One being a bounded interaction, where after just a few stars, the application would say, congratulations, you've completed the break activity challenge. Good work. In the unbounded interaction, it's up to the user to kind of, at some point, exercise that flexibility in work break timing and break away from the the break activity on their own. We wanted to understand, would people prefer that kind of flexibility, or is it the resolve that people that people would rather have? So in our pilot deployment, we recruited 3 women and 3 men, and the bounded and unbounded conditions were assigned randomly. These conditions switched after 4 days. We could kind of do a within subjects comparison. And to take advantage of this Ibeacon infrastructure, we deployed it locally at FXPAL. But I'm going to talk a little bit later about how you can do that without this, without such a rigid infrastructure. The data we collected through the smartphone sensors was the time the person left their office, the break opportunities, so whether they accepted that challenge, whether they actively dismissed it, or whether they ignored it completely, the duration of that break, the number of stars they collected, steps taken, and that change in their heart rate. We did do a bit of experience sampling, so when they come back to their office, that would trigger a notification that looks like this, so a 7-point Likert scale asking them how ready to work they are. And again, this is easily dismissed. At the end of the day, we sent them a survey via email asking if there was anything unusual about the workday, and if they took fewer or more work breaks than usual, how productive their workday was on a 5-point scale. And at the end of the study, we asked them to describe their experience with BreakSense and compare the bounded and unbounded work break experience and describe a preference. So just to clarify, by break opportunity here, we mean any moment where the users triggered the notification for an activity by walking away from their desk. And in terms of break opportunities, there were 210 collected in total, 88 of which were accepted, meaning that the user collected at least 1 star during that accepted challenge. 13 were dismissed, meaning that they took the phone out of their pocket and pressed the dismiss button or swiped it away. And 109 that were ignored. Now, with dismissed and ignored, it's tough to differentiate that from whether or not they were going on break. This really could be one of those moments where they're leaving to go to a meeting or leaving to just, where they weren't intending to think about this as a break. On the right, you can see that a lot of people were accepting these break challenges in the afternoon around 3 o'clock, which is kind of consistent with the midday slump that happens 8 hours after we wake up. In terms of comparing the stars collected in the bounded and unbounded interaction, they're pretty close. So the people are going almost right up to 3 on average on the bounded interaction, and just barely over that on average in the unbounded. But we do have instances of people really taking advantage of that unbounded interaction. So you can see here that the maximum stars collected in one break was 21, quite a bit higher than that bounded 3. In terms of steps, comparing the accepted break challenges versus the dismissed or ignored ones, we had quite a few more. You can see here on average, the accepted BreakSense activities resulted in 295 steps as opposed to 68. And there's a significant correlation positive correlation between the number of stars collected and the number of steps taken. So you really see that people feel like they're getting a lot of added steps. And we see that here with P4 saying it's always good to put some physical activity in your everyday routine. BreakSense did that for me by making me collect stars. And P6 saying it made me take more steps than I would have otherwise. Now, when we look at readiness to work, again, we made this an easily dismissible measure. And about 88% of the people that did responded above the neutral scale, with 53% of them giving it the very top. So that's highly skewed. We didn't want to do too many statistics on it, but it was interesting. In terms of productivity, there was a significant correlation between the number of breaks taken and the rating of one's own productivity at the end of the day. In terms of comparing preference for bounded and unbounded interaction, 5 out of 6 people really preferred that bounded interaction, and that was really because of the resolve that it gave to that break challenge. With P5, you can see here saying, I prefer the bounded mode because you get the feeling that you've completed something, and you have time to do something else in your break as well. With P4, contrasting that with the unbounded mode, the unbounded mode did not help me see the light at the end of the tunnel, and hence was not motivating. But not everyone felt this way. P2 here preferring the unbounded mode, saying she felt restricted during this time. So some people are preferring to exercise that flexibility. In the future, we'd like to do a longer-term deployment. We feel that we can do that with an infrastructure light system where most phones that are Bluetooth enabled can actually use the Ibeacon software and turning any Bluetooth enabled device into an Ibeacon itself. And we'd like to see what it would be like to kind of allow the user to adjust that bounded interaction. So maybe over time go from 3 to 5 to 7 stars in terms of that resolve. So in summary, we offer a set of design principles for work break activities. We implemented them in a BreakSense application. And we studied this sort of bounded versus unbounded gameplay. Again, I'd like to thank my collaborators at FXPAL and all the people at FXPAL, Daniel Avrahami and Matt Lee. Questions?
Hi, I'm Teresa Marie Ryan. I do color.
Can you speak up a little?
Yeah, this mic is kind of funny. I was thinking about, you're assuming desk jobs, right?
Yes, yeah.
All right, so what if you have a job where designers, you're staying up at a board all day long, or what are you work retail and you're staying at a cash register all day long? This is not going to work, is it?
Right, yeah. I think it's important to know that this is really, we thought about this as more of an opt-in system and not a system that the company you're working for would assert its users use.
You're implying a certain type of worker, very white-collar worker.
Yeah,
There are
true.
a lot of people on assembly lines. There are a lot of blue-collar workers.
And I think
your system doesn't address.
That's that's fair.
I think it might be nice to note that.
Yeah, I agree.
In your paper.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Cool talk. Very cool project. My name is Kramer Canfield. I'm a UX designer. So did you get any feedback from employees being sort of nervous about chasing down stars near their boss's office, or being seen by other people playing this? Like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm collecting stars. And
Yeah, we totally did, and specifically we started seeing that in a paper prototype I did. So in my first week there, I could only really find the snacks and coffee in the office. So when I did a paper prototype, I put up these little Post-its with stars around the office. I had no idea where I was putting them. I just logged it on a map and asked people to go find them when they went on break. And people would come back and they were like, oh, I liked it, but I really didn't like the idea that I was like scoping around my boss's office or things like that. And we get that feedback also in the pilot study. We talk a little bit more about that in the paper as well. So yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And we tried to get away from that in the get a different star and I am there buttons. I think it would be a cool thing to study further, though.
yeah, you could split up. You could have stars that are near the boss's office or not near the boss's office, and see what the motivation is.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Chris Jansen from Utrecht University. I like the design that's behind the system, but where I become a bit more critical is in how the users are using it. So I guess at some level my question is the aim to get people to walk or to have a break? Because based on the responses from some of your participants, it sounds more like they're slaves to the app than that they are actually taking a break, in the sense that they say, well, if I would have the chance to get 5 more stars, then I would have taken a longer break, which sounds absurd to me. If you're up for a break, take the break, right?
Yeah.
So is it? So I guess it depends on what the goal is. If the goal is to get them to walk, then that's good. But do they get the downtime that you normally would get from a break?
Yeah, thank you for that question, by the way. I think that is something that I don't know that we have enough data to really dive into, but my intuition is that for those that felt constrained by this activity, like they had to collect the stars, the typical gameplay experience of addictive gameplay, where it's really like, you're not going to win unless you get the next star, right? I think that was salient for those users. And those that felt more comfortable breaking away, maybe that kind of gameplay was not as salient. But I don't know. We'd have to study it a little bit more. Thank you, though.
Shamsi Iqbal, Microsoft Research. So I'm just going to ask for a clarification. So so BreakSense would only recommend walking when people were already up and out of their desk.
That's right.
Okay. Is there a reason why you're not considering, like, suggesting that you have been working for too long, go and take a break?
Yeah. The reason is that we didn't want to get into the game of trying to predict when somebody's not attending to their work as much. And we felt that self-interruption might be the more appropriate moment. The other thing is that when you get up and start walking away, you're already kind of doing the behavior that we'd like to promote. And we kind of wanted to push on that a little bit. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi, Kubisuri, University of Oulu. So thanks for the talk. It's really interesting. We're actually doing something very similar in our university as well. That's why I want to ask you, like, you mentioned that you measure the work efficiency of the participants. So what sort of ideas would you have to increase work efficiency even further using the system, and also maybe leveraging the non-break times of the day? So how would you use the system to actually, like, increase the work efficiency?
Okay, so in terms of increasing work productivity, so first I just want to talk about that break, non-break thing. So I don't know that we can really get at non-breaks. We can detect when somebody might be going on break, which is why we call it a break opportunity. But they really might be going to a meeting, and I don't know that, I can't think of a way that we could really detect whether or not that was a break without getting more user feedback. And in that sense, that would be a little bit more disruptive of an interaction. In terms of the productivity aspect, yeah, I think right now we're relying on the user to self-report that productivity. Measuring productivity requires a bit different kind of study that I'd be super interested to try, but we don't really get at here. Thank you, though.